Hello. I'd like to take a moment to dwell on the curious case of the incel and how this may relate to anti-circumcision activism. This phrase incel, it means involuntary celibate or involuntarily celibate. This is this class of angry young men who congregate in online forums. They're sort of angry about dislocations in the sexual marketplace and in dating and in the inability to find companionship. Specifically, the phrase incel denotes a very insular, arcane, secluded community of honestly quite angry and often quite caustic people. They most recently made the news with this guy in Toronto, going, TFW, no GF, and slamming a van into a crowd of people and killing 10 people. Prior to that, it was the Elliot Rodger guy who killed a couple people. But I guess I'm talking specifically about that, but I'm also talking about this broader trend of there's a broader trend of rising age of the loss of virginity, decreasing amounts of sex that are happening, people dropping out of the dating game. These are certainly people who would not necessarily even identify as incel. Most of these people would not identify with incel. In fact, I think this broader group would be better encapsulated by a trend called the grass eaters. I believe in Japan. It's just this catch-all phrase. It's not a self-identified phrase. The people themselves don't really call themselves this. It's just a socio-economic, political, cultural phrase that's sort of being imposed on these people. But these are young men who are sort of doing their own thing. They're maybe pursuing their careers, padding their careers. They're maybe playing video games. They're dropping out of the dating game to a large degree. They're not engaging in looking for a mate. And the sociologists are sort of looking at this, and they've coined a term for this. They call them grass eaters. And I'm thinking, what can these trends, what do they mean, and what can they do, and what do they mean for anti-circumcision activism? I will say, in general, men that are not engaged in dating tend to be more interested in this issue. In other words, when they're sort of, what can I say? In a small sense, if they're sitting around not dating, they're maybe sitting around masturbating. That's probably the only sexual release they're getting. They seem to be a bit more concerned about deliberate damage that was done to their genitals. They're not transferring their identity off to a woman. They're sort of stewing in their own juices in this regard. And I've found that in many cases, men go out and start dating, and many of them maybe don't just stop caring about this issue, or don't care as much about the issue, or they'll again, it's a transference of their sexual value and potency onto the woman, essentially, and nullifying a certain element of themselves. And I will say, in general, undersexed, disenfranchised young men tend to be a very ominous sign for a society. They tend to cause trouble. Undersexed, isolated, disenfranchised, well, maybe I shouldn't say isolated. I mean, initially maybe isolated, but disenfranchised young men tend to rise up and burn the system to the ground. They tend to rise up. They tend to rise up and burn a late-stage civilization to the ground. I mean, we look back in history. We look at the Hyksos and the Habiru in ancient Egypt. The Habiru may have been related to the ancient Hebrews. We're not entirely sure about that. But these were not so much invading armies as they were an entire social class of people. And indeed, they burned, I believe, Old and Middle Kingdom Egypt to the ground, resulting in the First and Second Intermediate periods. So I don't know. I think these young men are ripe for the kind of grievance mongering. Society absolutely hates you. Again, there's something very delicious about the way that the media and even some of these radical feminists are sort of screaming and gaslighting the hell out of especially the incels in regard to, after this recent attack in Toronto, telling them they're worthless and just worthless, useless men who don't even deserve companionship. And you can imagine, boy, if they're trying to prevent another incel terrorist attack, they are not going about it the right way, I can tell you that much. And there are sort of overtones of this sort of gaslighting in the debate over circumcision. I mean, the media and the medical field and society at large seems to love to gaslight circumcised men about their genital mutilation. And this could have explosive consequences. I mean, for the sort of grass eater class in general. Although, maybe specifically the incel community. If the incel community was coherently red-pilled on and explosively red-pilled on circumcision in one, fell swoop, it could be very dangerous indeed for the child-raping American infant circumcision industry. But, yeah, I don't know, this is just, it's something I noticed. We need to be willing to think about very disparate, widely diverse different ideas and how we may ride and manipulate social trends to help our cause. And I was fascinated by this incel and grass eater trend that has been making the news recently, and the implications it may have on the anti-circumcision movement. I will also say that these young men are ripe for grievance mongering, and the grievance mongering needs to be, society raped you, gaslights you, and we need to present a clear political narrative. You have to give them something to hang their hat on. You have to give them the circumcision ban, the punishment for the perpetrators. Young men like the idea of some retribution, some vengeance here. And massive government funding for tissue regeneration initiatives to make you whole again. Because you have to offer an alternative. This tissue regeneration thing is rhetorically and psychologically a game changer because it injects a level of self-interest here that didn't previously exist. Where if you get involved with the protest strategies and activism now, the school protest strategies that I've talked about in my other videos, it will directly impact your ability to be made whole again. Anyway, circumcision, incels, grass eaters, social trends. Tell me what you think. Tell me in the comments. Take care. Bye-bye.